Some of the people you begged Allah to keep, He was actually protecting you from. Because it might be the most important sentence you hear all week. Somewhere right now, there is a person sitting with their phone in their hand, staring at a conversation that ended weeks or months or years ago, still asking the same question at 2 in the morning. Why did it fall apart? Why did they leave? Why did Allah let me lose the one thing I prayed so hard to keep? And tonight, by the time this message ends, I want that question to sound completely different in your mind. Not why did I lose them, but what was I actually being saved from? Stay with me here, because most people only understand what I am about to explain after years of unnecessary pain, after chasing someone who was never meant to stay, after mistaking a closed door for a punishment instead of what it actually was. You may have been living through exactly this and never had the words for it. So tonight we are going to walk through 7 quiet, often overlooked signs that Allah was protecting you from the wrong person, not by shouting it at you, not by sending some dramatic sign in the sky, but through small moments you likely brushed past without realizing what they meant. And the last one, the 7th sign, is the one almost nobody notices until years later. So stay with me until we get there. Before we go further, I want you to sit with something honestly. Think of someone you once wanted so badly to stay in your life. Maybe they're still there and something in your chest tightens every time you think about them. Maybe they are already gone and you still have not made peace with it. I am not asking you to name them out loud. I am asking you to hold that person quietly in your mind as we walk through this together. Because every single sign we discuss tonight, I want you to measure against that person, honestly, without defending them out of habit, without softening the truth just because your heart still feels something. Maybe you already know exactly who I mean. Maybe there is a specific face, a specific name, a specific memory that surfaced the instant I said the words wrong person, even before I finished the sentence. Or maybe it is less clear than that, more of a feeling than a face, a general sense that something in your past kept costing you more than it ever gave back, and you have never quite been able to name what it was or why it still sits heavy in your chest years later. Either way is fine. This message was written for both of you. Here is the first sign, and it is one of the most important ones we will talk about tonight, so give it your full attention. The first sign that Allah was protecting you from someone is that being around them consistently pulled you further from your faith rather than closer to it. Let me paint a picture for you, because sometimes a story makes something clearer than an explanation ever could. Imagine a young woman who used to pray every prayer on time without even thinking about it, the way brushing your teeth becomes automatic once it is part of your life. Then she meets someone. At first, nothing changes. Then slowly, one prayer gets pushed back because he calls right when she should be getting up to pray, and she tells herself she will pray in a few minutes. Then a few minutes becomes an hour. Then Fajr becomes the prayer she consistently misses because their late night phone calls run until she can barely keep her eyes open. None of this happened because she stopped believing. None of this happened because of one dramatic decision. It happened one small compromise at a time, so gradually that she did not notice the distance growing between herself and her Lord until months later, when she finally sat down for Maghrib one evening and felt like a stranger to her own prayer mat. That is what this first sign actually looks like in a real life. It rarely announces itself. It creeps in wearing the disguise of love, of priorities, of just this one time, until one day you look up and realize how far you have drifted from where you used to stand. Think about this carefully. Not once or twice, not during one difficult season where anyone might slip, but as a pattern, as a direction, your life was quietly moving in the entire time this person was part of it. Were your prayers becoming lighter or heavier around them? Were you finding it easier to sit and read the Quran, or did that habit slowly disappear the more time you spent trying to keep this person happy? Did you start justifying things to yourself that you once would have refused without a second thought, simply because saying no might have cost you the relationship? My friend, this is not a small detail. This is one of the clearest signs a person can be given, because righteousness in Islam was never described as complicated or mysterious. There is a beautiful hadith where a companion by the name of Wabisa came to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and before Wabisa could even finish his question, the Prophet already understood what he had come to ask. He said to him, "You have come to ask about righteousness." Wabisa said yes. And the Prophet told him something so simple, it almost feels too easy, and yet it carries enormous weight. He said, consult your heart. Righteousness is what brings peace to the soul and stillness to the heart. And wrongdoing is what stirs unease in the soul, no matter how many people around you insist it is fine. Sit with that for a moment. No matter how many people tell you it is fine. Think about how many of us have stayed in situations we already knew, deep down, were pulling us away from who we were trying to become. Simply because everyone around us kept saying it was fine, kept saying we were overreacting, kept saying love requires sacrifice like this. But your soul already knew. It always knows. The unease you felt was not weakness. It was your heart, still connected to its creator, quietly trying to warn you. There is a reason this kind of quiet drift is so hard to notice while it is happening. And understanding that reason matters because it will help you recognize it faster next time. Human beings have a remarkable ability to justify almost anything when the alternative feels like losing someone we have grown attached to. This is not a character flaw unique to you. It is simply how attachment works in the human heart. Once we have invested time, hope, and emotion into a person, our mind starts working overtime to protect that investment. Even when protecting it means quietly lowering our own standards one small inch at a time. Psychologists call part of this sunk cost thinking, the feeling that because you have already given so much, walking away now would make everything you already gave feel wasted. But my friend, time spent learning something about yourself, even painfully, is never wasted. What is wasted is staying longer, simply to avoid admitting that the investment was not building what you thought it was building. Now here is where it gets harder to admit, so stay with me, because this next part touches something many people avoid looking at directly. Sometimes the person did not do anything you could point to and call wrong. They never raised their voice. They never lied to you outright. And so you assumed that because nothing dramatic happened, nothing was actually wrong. But ask yourself honestly, did you become a softer, more grounded version of yourself around them? Or did you become someone constantly negotiating with your own conscience? Because that quiet negotiation, that small voice you kept talking over, that was not nothing. That was the first sign. And most people do not recognize it until years later, usually after the relationship has already ended, and they finally have enough distance to see clearly what they could not see while they were standing inside it. Let us move to the second sign now, because it builds directly on what we just discussed, and it might be even harder to hear. The second sign is this. Your heart never fully rested around them, even during the good moments. Imagine this for a second. Think back to the calmest, happiest memory you have with this person. Really picture it. And now ask yourself, honestly, underneath that happiness, was there still a small current of anxiety running through you? A worry about when the mood might shift? A fear of saying the wrong thing? A quiet bracing for disappointment that never fully left, even when things were going well? Let me give you another picture, because this sign is easy to miss unless you can see it play out in front of you. Imagine a man who finally, after years of being single, meets someone he is genuinely excited about. On paper, everything looks promising. She is kind to him in front of others. She says the right things. And yet, every single time his phone buzzes with her name on the screen, something in his stomach tightens before he even reads the message. He tells himself it is just nerves, the normal anxiety of new love. But months pass, and that tightening never fades. He finds himself rehearsing conversations in his head before they happen, calculating how to phrase things so she will not misunderstand him, feeling a strange sense of relief on the rare evenings she does not text at all. He calls this being considerate. What it actually is, if he is honest with himself, is a nervous system that never got the chance to relax. Because on some level, it never fully trusted what it was standing on. This is different from ordinary nervousness at the beginning of getting to know someone, the kind that fades naturally as trust builds. This is something else entirely. This is a heart that never actually settled, not because it lacked the capacity to trust, but because something in that specific relationship never gave it permission to. My friend, real security with another human being does not feel like constant management. It does not feel like you are perpetually adjusting yourself to avoid setting something off. When a connection is genuinely good for you, your heart begins to exhale. It does not remain permanently braced. If yours never did, that absence of rest was not a flaw in you. It was information. It was your own soul, again, quietly consulting itself the way the Prophet, peace be upon him, told Wabisa it always does, and coming back with an answer you were too afraid to listen to. There is a common confusion that traps a lot of sincere, good-hearted people right here. So let us name it clearly. Many of us were taught, without anyone ever saying it directly, that intensity is the same thing as depth. That if a connection makes your heart race, if it keeps you up at night, if it consumes your thoughts constantly, that must mean it is significant, meaningful, worth pursuing no matter the cost. But anxiety and love do not actually feel identical, even though they can be mistaken for one another in the moment. Love that is healthy tends to grow calmer over time, not more chaotic. It becomes a steady presence rather than a constant emotional event. If what you were calling love never calmed down, if it stayed in that same anxious, uncertain register month after month, it is worth asking honestly whether what kept you attached was genuine connection or the exhausting, addictive cycle of chasing a calm that never quite arrived. Stay with me, because the third sign is one that so many people misread completely. And once you understand it correctly, you will never see closed doors the same way again. The third sign is that no matter how hard you tried to make things work, circumstances outside your control kept interfering. Timing was always off. Something always came up. Plans that should have moved forward simply did not, again and again, in ways that started to feel less like coincidence and more like a pattern you could not explain. Picture this scenario, because it happens far more often than people realize, and it rarely gets recognized for what it is until much later. A couple wants to move forward with marriage, and everything that should logically fall into place keeps mysteriously failing to. The family meeting that should have been simple keeps getting postponed for reasons that never quite make sense. The paperwork that should take weeks stretches into months. A financial opportunity that would have made the wedding possible falls through right when it seemed most certain. Each obstacle on its own looks like ordinary bad luck, the kind everyone experiences at some point. But when you step back and count them together, when you notice how consistently this specific relationship seemed to attract friction that other areas of life did not, a different picture starts to emerge, one that most people are too invested to see while they are standing inside it. Many people interpret this kind of resistance as a test of their commitment, as proof that they need to try even harder, push even more, sacrifice even more of themselves to force the situation into place. But my friend, there is a difference between a trial that is meant to strengthen something good and resistance that is meant to protect you from something that was never meant to be. One of the most repeated principles across the Quran is that human beings are simply not equipped to judge in the moment what is actually good for them. Allah tells us plainly that you may dislike something which is, in truth, good for you, and you may love something which is, in truth, harmful to you. And Allah knows what you do not know. Read that again. Allah knows what you do not know. When you were forcing a door to open that kept quietly closing, you were operating on incomplete information. You could only see the moment in front of you. You could not see the years ahead. Allah could. And sometimes the mercy was not in opening that door. The mercy was in every obstacle that kept it shut, no matter how frustrating that felt to you at the time. Let me ask you something now. And I want you to actually sit with this instead of rushing past it the way we rush past most reflective questions in daily life. How many times in your life has something you desperately wanted not happen, only for you to look back years later and feel an overwhelming sense of relief that it did not? Maybe it was a job, maybe it was a friendship, maybe it was exactly the kind of relationship we are talking about tonight. If you can recall even one clear example of that in your own life, then you already have proof from your own experience that closed doors are not always punishment. Sometimes they are the clearest form of protection. Allah offers a person who cannot yet see what He can see. Now we come to the fourth sign, and this one requires a certain kind of humility to accept, because it involves other people noticing something before you were ready to admit it yourself. The fourth sign is that the people who love you sincerely, the ones with no agenda except your well-being, kept expressing quiet concern, even when you could not fully explain why they felt that way. Maybe it was a parent who grew unusually quiet whenever this person's name came up. Maybe it was a close friend who never said anything harsh, but who you noticed, pulling back slightly, choosing her words carefully, clearly, holding something back out of respect for your feelings. Let me describe a moment that plays out in countless households in one form or another. A daughter brings someone home for the first time, excited, nervous, hoping for approval. Her mother says all the polite things a good host says, offers tea, asks about his family, smiles in all the right places. But later that night, when the daughter asks eagerly what her mother thought, there is a pause before the answer comes. Not a harsh word, not an accusation. Just a pause and a carefully chosen sentence like, "He seems nice," followed by nothing else. That silence between what was said and what clearly was not said can carry more information than an entire lecture would have. Daughters often move past this moment quickly, telling themselves their mother simply needs time to warm up to anyone new. Sometimes that is exactly what is happening. But sometimes, if she is honest with herself months or years later, that pause was the first quiet flag in a story that took much longer to fully reveal itself. Many people dismiss this kind of concern as jealousy or overprotectiveness, or people simply not understanding the relationship the way the two people inside it understand it. And sometimes, to be fair, that dismissal is correct. Not every concerned relative is right. But ask yourself honestly whether that was actually the case for you, or whether you were using that explanation because it was easier than sitting with what they were actually seeing. People who love you without any hidden motive are often watching your life from a vantage point you cannot access while you are standing inside the relationship yourself. They see the version of you before this person and the version of you now. And sometimes the shift between those two versions is visible to everyone except the person living inside it. That is not always interference. Sometimes that is Allah placing sincere people in your life specifically to say the thing you were not yet ready to say to yourself. There is an important distinction worth pausing on here, because language shapes how we carry pain, and the words we use to describe what happened matter more than we usually realize. We often say a person left us as though we were simply abandoned, as though what happened was entirely their doing and entirely our loss. But from an Islamic understanding, nothing enters or exits your life without passing through the permission of Allah first. That does not remove the other person's responsibility for how they behaved. And it does not mean you should excuse genuine wrongdoing simply by calling it destiny. But it does mean that the ending itself, the actual closing of that door, was not random, was not simply bad luck, was not proof that you are someone people leave. It was allowed to happen by a Lord who does not allow things without wisdom behind them, even when that wisdom takes years to become visible. Reframing it this way does not erase the pain. It changes what the pain means. It stops being evidence that something is wrong with you and starts being evidence that something was being handled on your behalf by someone who could see further than you could. Before we move to the fifth sign, I want to pause here and talk honestly about something underneath all four signs we have covered so far, because understanding it will help everything else make more sense. Why does any of this happen in the first place? Why do good, sincere, faithful people find themselves attached to someone whose presence quietly pulls them away from their prayers, whose company never lets their heart fully rest, whose path keeps meeting resistance, whose absence worries the people who love them most? The honest answer often has less to do with the other person than we would like to admit, and more to do with something happening inside us. Many of us, without ever naming it clearly, carry a quiet fear of being alone. A fear that if this particular person leaves, something worse than loneliness awaits us, an emptiness we are not sure we could survive. That fear makes us excellent at editing reality. It makes us skilled at explaining away red flags, at telling ourselves that this discomfort is simply what commitment requires, that anyone who truly loved us would not feel this unsettled around the person meant for them. Some of us are also quietly seeking a kind of validation we never fully received somewhere else in our lives, and when someone offers us attention, even inconsistent or unhealthy attention, our heart mistakes that inconsistency for excitement, that unpredictability for chemistry, when in truth it is often just the nervous system responding to uncertainty the way it might respond to any other stressor. None of this makes you foolish. It makes you human. But naming it honestly is the only way to stop it from repeating itself in your next relationship the way it repeated itself in this one. Here is the fifth sign, and this one is deeply personal. So I want you to think back honestly to your own private prayers. The fifth sign is what happened inside you whenever you asked Allah directly for clarity about this person. Not what you hoped would happen, not what you wanted the answer to be. What actually happened in your heart after you made that specific dua, sincerely, without trying to steer the outcome toward what you already wanted. Not what you wanted the answer to be. What actually happened in your heart after you made that specific dua, sincerely, without trying to steer the outcome toward what you already wanted. This is exactly what the guidance around seeking istikhara is designed for. Asking Allah directly to show you what is genuinely good for you when your own judgment feels clouded by hope or fear or attachment. Many people treat istikhara as a formality, something to perform quickly before doing what they had already decided to do anyway, and then they wonder why clarity never seems to come. But when it is made sincerely, with real openness to whatever answer Allah sends, something shifts. Picture a woman lying awake after making that exact dua about a proposal she was genuinely torn over. She was not looking for permission to do what she already wanted. She was truly asking. And over the following weeks, without any single dramatic sign, she noticed her anxiety about the decision slowly being replaced by an unexpected steadiness. Even as small details about the situation continued to trouble her. That steadiness was not indifference. It was an answer arriving quietly, exactly the way these answers most often do. For some people, asking for clarity brought a strange, unexpected calm, even before anything in the external situation changed. A quiet settling, a sense that whatever happened next would be all right, even if it was not the outcome they originally hoped for. For others, asking for clarity brought more anxiety, more desperate bargaining, more elaborate justifications for why this specific person had to be the right one, despite every signal suggesting otherwise. My friend, there is a well-known hadith that every believer should carry with them, because it changes the entire way a person experiences unanswered prayers. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said that there is no believer who makes a sincere supplication, free of sin and free of anything that would break family ties, except that Allah grants him one of three things. Either the exact thing he asked for is given to him quickly, or it is stored for him as a reward waiting in the next life, better than anything he could have received here, or Allah wards off from him a harm of equal measure to what he asked for. When the companions heard this, they were amazed and said they would then ask for even more. And the Prophet responded that Allah has even more to give than any of us could ask for. Sit with that for a moment. If you asked Allah sincerely for clarity about this person and the relationship still did not continue the way you hoped, that does not necessarily mean your dua went unanswered. It may mean Allah warded off a harm you could not yet see coming, a harm equal in size to the very thing you were asking for. That is not a rejected prayer. That is a redirected mercy. We are moving now into the sixth sign, and I want you to prepare yourself honestly for this one, because it asks you to look at your own healing with complete honesty instead of nostalgia. The sixth sign is this: once real distance settled in, once enough time had passed for the initial ache to soften, what you experienced was not lingering devastation. It was relief, quietly arriving underneath the sadness. Sometimes so subtly you almost felt guilty for noticing it. Imagine this: a few months have passed. The sharp edges of the pain have dulled. And in a quiet moment, something in your chest loosens in a way it had not been able to loosen for a long time. Imagine this: a few months have passed. The sharp edges of the pain have dulled. And in a quiet moment, something in your chest loosens in a way it had not been able to loosen for a long time. Think of someone sitting in traffic on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, a year after a relationship that once felt like the center of their entire world ended. A song plays on the radio that used to remind them of that person, the exact song that once would have brought them to tears in an instant. And this time, instead of pain, there is just a faint, almost surprising sense of nostalgia, followed quickly by something closer to gratitude, an unexpected thought crossing their mind before they can stop it. Thank Allah that ended. Not because the memories were bad, Not because the person was evil, but because the version of life that continued afterward turned out to hold something steadier, something that fits who they actually are far better than what they were once willing to accept, simply because they were afraid of being without it. That feeling is not betrayal of what you once felt. It is not proof that your original feelings were fake. It is your soul finally exhaling after holding its breath for far longer than you realized. There is a beautiful hadith narrated by a companion named Suhaib, where the Prophet, peace be upon him, said something remarkable about the life of a believer. He said, "Wondrous is the affair of the believer, for there is good for him in every matter, and this is the case for no one except the believer. If something good happens to him, he is grateful, and that is good for him. And if something difficult happens to him, he is patient, and that is good for him as well." Think about the depth of that statement. It does not say the believer avoids hardship. It says every single outcome, without exception, becomes good in the hands of someone who trusts Allah through it. The heartbreak you carried was not wasted pain. It was refining you. Even during the months, it felt like it was only breaking you. And Allah reminds us elsewhere, in one of the shortest and most repeated promises in the entire Quran, that with hardship comes ease. That this promise is not conditional. It is not maybe, it is stated as certain. And Allah reminds us elsewhere, in one of the shortest and most repeated promises in the entire Quran, that with hardship comes ease. That this promise is not conditional. It is not maybe, it is stated as certain. Scholars have long pointed out something remarkable about how that promise is phrased in the Quran. That the ease mentioned is described as arriving together with the hardship, not simply after it, as though the relief was never truly separate from the pain in the first place, planted inside it from the very beginning, waiting for the right amount of time to pass before it could be recognized. This is why so many people describe healing not as the pain simply disappearing, but as the sudden ability to see something that had been there all along, hidden inside the difficulty itself. The relief was not manufactured after the fact to make you feel better. It was there from the beginning, part of the same decree that allowed the hardship to happen, and your job was never to create it. Your job was only to be patient long enough to eventually see it. If you have felt that quiet loosening in your chest after enough time passed, that was not you being disloyal to what you once felt. That was the ease Allah promised, finally arriving exactly where He said it would. Now, before we reach the seventh sign, I need to pause here and speak honestly about something that comes up constantly around this exact topic, because I do not want anything in this message to be misused. Now, before we reach the seventh sign, I need to pause here and speak honestly about something that comes up constantly around this exact topic, because I do not want anything in this message to be misused. I want to be especially careful here, because reminders like this one are sometimes taken and twisted into something they were never meant to be. This is not a message telling you that every difficult season in a marriage means you married the wrong person. It is not telling you that every argument, every dry patch, every moment of frustration with someone you love is a divine signal to leave. Marriage, real marriage, the kind built with sincerity and effort, will always include seasons that are hard. There will be times you are tired, times you misunderstand each other, times the love feels more like quiet commitment than fireworks. That is not brokenness. That is simply what building a life with another imperfect human being actually looks like. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, himself taught patience, gentleness, and effort within marriage as core parts of faith, not signs of a mistake. If you are searching for an excuse to walk away from something genuinely good simply because it currently feels hard, please do not let this message become that excuse. What we are describing tonight is something different and far more specific than an ordinary hard season. So let me say it plainly one more time before we continue. Everything we have discussed tonight is describing patterns that unfold slowly, over time, through genuine reflection. None of this is permission to walk away from every relationship the moment it becomes difficult, or to diagnose someone as the wrong person simply because a season together felt hard. Every meaningful relationship, marriage especially, involves real effort, real patience, and real seasons of difficulty that are not signs of anything being wrong. They are simply what commitment costs. What we are describing tonight is something different and more specific, a consistent pattern, a direction, a heart that never rested, a soul that kept warning you. Doors that kept closing no matter how hard you tried to force them open. People who love you sincerely expressing quiet, repeated concern. Prayers for clarity that brought either peace or a strange chaos you could not explain away. And distance that eventually revealed relief instead of ongoing devastation. If you are looking at your own life honestly and these patterns are not what you are seeing, then what you are likely facing is a normal hard season. And the appropriate response is patience and effort, not walking away. But if these patterns are exactly what you have been seeing quietly for a long time, then what I am about to say next is for you. Here, finally, is the seventh sign, the one I told you at the beginning that almost nobody notices until years later. The seventh sign is this. Something else eventually appeared in your life, something calmer, something more aligned with who you actually are. And only in comparison to that did you finally understand what the earlier chaos had actually been. This is the sign most people miss completely because it does not happen immediately. It requires time. It requires enough distance for a new normal to establish itself so that the old normal can finally be seen clearly for what it was. Imagine this. Years pass. Life moves forward in ways you could not have predicted while you were still inside that earlier pain. And then, in some quiet, unremarkable moment, perhaps in a completely different relationship, or perhaps simply in the peace of your own solitude, you feel something settle in your chest that never settled before. And in that exact moment, without warning, you finally understand with complete clarity what you were protected from all those years ago. Not because someone told you, not because you forced yourself to accept it, but because you finally have something real to compare the old pain against, and the comparison makes everything obvious in a way it never could have been while you were still living inside the confusion. And then, in some quiet, unremarkable moment, perhaps in a completely different relationship, or perhaps simply in the peace of your own solitude, you feel something settle in your chest that never settled before. Picture someone years later, sitting across from a different person entirely. Someone whose presence does not require constant management, whose calls do not bring that familiar tightening in the stomach, whose family welcomed them with genuine warmth instead of a telling pause. And in the middle of an ordinary, unremarkable evening together, doing nothing more significant than sharing a simple meal, a thought arrives with startling clarity. So this is what it was supposed to feel like the whole time. Not the chaos, not the anxious waiting, not the constant translating of mixed signals into hope. This, the calm, the steadiness, the quiet, was what should have been normal all along. And in that moment, without needing anyone to explain it, the earlier heartbreak finally makes complete sense. Not as a loss, but as the very thing that had to happen to make room for this. My friend, I want you to think back now to that person you held quietly in your mind at the beginning of this message. Walk back through everything we have discussed tonight and ask yourself honestly, which of these 7 signs you recognize in your own story? You do not need to answer out loud. You do not need to explain it to anyone. But I want you to be honest with yourself in this quiet moment, because that honesty is the beginning of something important. If you found several of these signs matching your own experience, I want you to understand something clearly before we close tonight. The version of you that survived that season is not damaged. You are not someone who failed at love, or who cannot be loved properly, or who keeps making the same mistake out of some flaw in your character. You are someone who was protected by a creator who saw further down the road than you were able to see, and who loved you enough to let something painful happen in the short term so that something far worse could be avoided in the long term. And who loved you enough to let something painful happen in the short term so that something far worse could be avoided in the long term. I know that for some of you listening tonight, this is easier to accept in theory than it is to actually feel in your chest right now. Maybe you are still in the thick of it. Maybe the person this message reminded you of is still in your life or only recently left it, and everything I have said still feels like a distant comfort rather than a present reality. That is all right. Healing is rarely immediate, and understanding something intellectually is not the same as feeling it settle into your bones. Give yourself permission to still be in process. You do not need to arrive at full peace tonight for any of this to be true. The protection was real, whether or not you feel grateful for it yet. I also want to speak briefly to anyone listening who is currently single and has been for longer than they expected, because everything we have discussed tonight applies to you in a slightly different way. Perhaps no specific wrong person has come and gone in your story. Perhaps the protection you are living through right now is simply the waiting itself, the door that has not yet opened at all. It can be difficult to see delay as protection when there is no clear alternative story to compare it against. No obvious wrong person you can point to and say, that is what I was spared. But the same principle applies. What feels like absence may simply be preparation, a season being used to build in you exactly what the future requires, even when you cannot yet see the shape of what is coming. Trust that the same Lord who protects people from wrong doors is equally capable of preparing the right one in a timing that only makes sense once you are finally standing inside it. Understand this clearly, because it matters far more than it might seem right now. Left unexamined, this pattern does not simply fade with time on its own. If you do not take the honesty this message is asking of you tonight, there is a real risk you carry the same unresolved ache into the next relationship, and the one after that, quietly repeating a story you never fully understood the first time. That is the actual cost of avoiding this kind of reflection, not some distant abstract idea, but years spent circling the same pain in different disguises, wondering why it keeps finding you. This message will not fix that by itself, but recognizing it clearly tonight, in this quiet moment, is where that pattern finally has a chance to break. So here is what I want you to do right now. While everything we have discussed is still fresh in your heart, think of the one sign out of the 7 we walked through tonight that hit closest to your own experience. Just one. And if you are willing, write it in the comments. Not the whole story, not every detail, just which sign you recognized, and perhaps one honest sentence about what it taught you once you finally saw it clearly. Reading that you are not the only one who lived through this can be its own kind of healing. And someone reading your words tonight may recognize their own story inside yours for the very first time. And if this message reached you exactly when you needed to hear it, send it to someone you know is quietly still asking why, because they may not have the language for what they are feeling yet, and this might be exactly what gives it to them. Before we part ways tonight, I want to leave you with one final thought, and I want you to carry this with you longer than you carry most things you hear today. Every single person Allah has ever removed from your life was removed by someone who already knew your entire story before you lived a single day of it. He knew the version of events you could not see. He knew the years ahead that you had no way of predicting. When you asked Him to keep someone, and He gently, patiently, sometimes painfully closed that door instead, He was not punishing you. He was writing you a better story than the one you were trying to write for yourself, using information only. He had access to. You are not behind because a chapter you wanted ended early. You are not unlovable because someone was not the one meant to stay. You are simply someone who was protected by a Lord who loves you more than any person you were afraid to lose, and who is still, right now, quietly writing what comes next. So tonight, before you close this and return to whatever the rest of your evening holds, I want you to say something quietly to yourself, even if no one else ever hears it. Say, I trust that what was taken from me was taken with wisdom, and I trust that what is coming was prepared with the same care. You do not need to feel it completely yet for it to be true. Faith often works that way, spoken before it is fully felt, believed before it is fully understood, and slowly, with time and with patience, the feeling eventually catches up to the words. Let tonight be the night you stopped asking why it happened to you and started trusting who allowed it to happen for you.